The 5 Busy Bears. One morning the 5 little black bears, Yippy, Skippy, Nippy, Joe, and Tip, jumped out of their 5 little beds and said, "We're tired of being good bears. Let's do something exciting today." They slipped out of the back door when their mother wasn't looking and ran as fast as they could across the backyard to the house next door. There was a man who had been painting with buckets of white paint. They didn't see anybody looking, and they didn't hear anybody coming. They sniffed the air and didn't smell anyone around. So Yippy and Skippy and Nippy and Joe and Tip all jumped right into the buckets of paint and out again, so they were all nice sticky white polar bear cubs. All except one paw of Tip that didn't get into the paint and was still black. They ran and they ran and they ran until the paint was all dry, and just when they were trying to cross a crossing very carefully, a man stopped his car beside them. "There you are, you busy polar bear cubs," said the man. "You're the little bears that ran away from the zoo last night. I've been hunting all over for you. You get right back into the seat and come with me." They rode and they rode and they rode until they came to the zoo, and the car stopped right in front of a big great cage. "Here's the cage you got out of last night," said the man. "I'm going to put you right back in and lock the door." "We never lived in this cage," said Yippy. "We never lived in any cage," said Skippy. "We never ran away," said Snippy. "We never had any cage to run away from," said Joe. "Ah, heck," said Tip, who wasn't a very polite little bear. The man just laughed and tossed the little bears into the cage and said, "There you go, back to your mother, you silly little bears. You can't fool me." And just then, out of the big cave at the end of the cage, came a big white mama polar bear. The 5 little bears were so scared they couldn't even squeal. The big mama polar bear came right over to Yippy and sniffed a big. "You aren't my little bear," she growled, and she gave Yippy a bat with her paw that knocked him clear across the cage into a corner. Then the big polar bear came over and sniffed Skippy and Nippy. "You aren't my little bears," she growled, and she gave both Skippy and Nippy a bat with her paw that knocked them clear across the cage into the corner with Yippy. Then the big mama polar bear sniffed of Joe and said, "You are my polar bear," and batted him into the corner with Yippy, Skippy, and Nippy. "And I'm not your little bear either," said Tip, who was way up in the top of the cage in the little tree. "But what are you going to do about it?" Then the big mama polar bear growled a big growl and shook the tree, but Tip just laughed and stuck out his naughty little tongue at her. Then the big white polar bear growled a mighty growl. The only way to tell little polar bears from other little bears is to see if they like ice water. "I don't like ice water," said Yippy. "We'll see," growled the big white mama bear. She chased Yippy around the cage 6 times before she could throw him into the big tank of ice water. "I don't like ice water," squealed the poor little Skippy. "We'll see," growled the big white mama bear, and she chased Skippy around 7 times before she could catch him and throw him in. "I don't like ice water," shrieked little Nippy. "We'll see," said the big white mama bear. She chased the poor little Nippy 8 times around the cage before she could catch her and throw her in. "I don't like ice water," yelled poor little Joe. "Well, we'll see," growled the big white mama bear. She chased poor little Joe around the cage 9 times before she could catch him and throw him in. "I don't like ice water either," said little Tip from up in the tree, "but try to catch me." "Well, that's funny," said the bear who had caught the 5 little bears and put them in the cage. "I never saw little polar bears who didn't like ice water." "We aren't polar bears," cried the 5 little bears, who were now all up in trees in the cage. "We're little black bears covered with white paint." And Tip said, "That's right, we're little black bears. See my one back paw?" "Why, so you are," said the man. "I'll take you right out of the cage and take you home. My mistake." And he put them in the back of the car and took them home. "It's nearly supper time. Don't you want some ice cream cones?" "Yes!" shouted Yippy, Skippy, and Nippy, and Joe.
"I would like the 2 ice creams. I love him."
"I want 2 ice cream cones," said Tip.
I love Tip.
"You bad little bears," said their mother when they got home. "I'm going to scrub off that paint and put you to bed without any supper." Well, Tip just smiled. He remembered the little ice cream cones.